Mr. President, I rise today in opposition to the massive spending increases included in the proposed budget measure. To propose increasing federal spending by nearly $300 billion over the next 2 years, on top of the spending increases already established, is simply beyond comprehension. This is all with a national debt of $20 trillion a year, current deficits running $600 to $700 billion. Yet we're about to vote on a bill to abandon self-imposed limits on federal spending. And anybody who's spent time in Washington will know that once you've raised spending limits, you just don't get them back down. Now, I love bipartisanship, but not when it's bought and paid for with billions of taxpayer dollars. That's precisely what this measure does. You sprinkle enough money around, you can get bipartisan support. While I was in the House for 12 years, I kept a journal of events. And in December of 2007, when we passed a massive omnibus bill at that time, I noted, and I'll quote from my journal, "The Democrats singled out the funding for the Iraq War, which required a separate vote. The tally board on the House chamber wall explaining the vote said the following: agreeing to the House amendment, to the Senate amendment, to the House amendment." I said at that time, well, that clears it up. But that's the point. Liberal Democrats could vote against the war funding and for more domestic funding. Conservative Republicans could do the opposite. Enough moderates in the middle would vote for both pieces of legislation to ensure that each passed separately. I continued, then we could, all of us, Republicans and Democrats, beat our collective chests and go home for Christmas. Bipartisanship at its best. I wrote further in my journal at that time, all these shenanigans led one Republican colleague to lean over to me on the House floor and muse, "You know, Jeff, sometimes the toughest thing about being a member of Congress is remembering everything you're supposed to be outraged about." And I agreed. But here we are today, and it is clear what we should be outraged about: a $300 billion spending hike, a return to trillion-dollar deficits, and an apparent end to any attempt to rein in federal spending. Our fiscal responsibility is more than a political talking point to trot out when the other guys are in charge. The rules and principles do not change with the legislative session. It should not take hundreds of billions of dollars in government spending to prompt bipartisanship or to secure a budget agreement. If we Republicans support precisely the kind of reckless spending that we've for so long criticized, it will mean an end of genuine fiscal conservatism in Washington, and it will establish a government without any meaningful spending restraints. I urge my colleagues to consider their commitment to conservatism and whether or not the past protests over government spending were anything more than convenient political props. Let's be conservative no matter who's in charge, no matter who's in the White House or who controls each chamber in Congress. With that, I yield the floor.